A few of his accolades and accomplishments: four-year scholarship at the University of Houston, a collegiate All-American, member of the NCAA championship team of Houston, member of 6 Hall of Fames, including the World Teacher Hall of Fame, made the cut at the Masters, finished 4th in the U.S. Amateur, won the Northwest Open, won the Northwest Amateur 3 times, won the Pacific Coast Amateur, featured speaker at 8 U.S. Coaching and Teaching Summits, at 3 European Coaching and Teaching Summits, has received the National Teacher Award, the National Professional Development Award, and is the co-chairman of the United States Coaching and Teaching Summit. Jim McLean has been called the most copied teacher in the history of golf. Not only has he written 14 books, he has also traveled the world doing seminars and education forums. Jim has spoken in nearly every United States PGA section where he has done educational seminars for their members. He has been a lead presenter in England, Spain, Switzerland, Italy, and Japan, Thailand, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and Mexico. Jim has brought all of his knowledge to his own staff through his training sessions, second to none. The results have been astonishing. 13 JMGS teachers ranked in America's top 100. There have been 55 JMGS teachers ranked as best in their state, and JMGS certified teachers occupy some of the top club pro positions in the United States. There have been 50 JMGS certified teachers become head professionals at top private facilities, and the research at Jim McLean Golf Schools and the drive to be the best in the business is the overriding principle that Jim relentlessly preaches to us every day. Please give me help in bringing up Jim McLean to the stage.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be back here in Houston. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and I remember flying down here. It was August 15th, and there's no jet bridge when I got off the plane in Houston. And it was really something walking off the plane. It was a 50 degrees change from Seattle. And so I got used to it. I didn't know what heat was until I came out here. I went there to the athletic dorm at the University of Houston. We stayed in the dorm with the basketball team. And we had 40 guys on the golf team in our dorm. Rooms on both sides. And I noticed, there were pot marks in the steel doors on both sides. And you had to be careful when you walked out of your dorm because somebody could be hitting a 1-iron right down the hallway. And that happened a lot, by the way. So the doors got slammed there. But 40 guys, of course, 5 played. It was pretty competitive. I came in with 17 freshmen, and I ended up being the only guy that stayed more than a few years. We had a lot of great players at that time. There were some guys that really didn't play much when I was there and ended up winning on the PGA Tour. Bobby Watkins and Tom Jenkins. We had a couple guys, John Grace and Doug Ballinger, who didn't play, and they both made the Walker Cup team. John Grace almost won the U.S. Amateur. I lived with John Mahaffey at school. I lived with Bill Rogers. I lived with Bruce Litzke, one of my roommates. And Mahaffey won the PGA. He lost the U.S. Open in the playoff. Bill Rogers won the British Open. He was the #1 ranked player in the world in 1981. He won 10 tournaments one year. The Australian Open, Masters, the Japanese Open, and whatever, the World Match Play, and Texas Open that year, and just can't remember all of them. It was an amazing year. And then he retired when he was 33. My senior year, we played in Florida, the NCAA championship. We had a great year that year. We played really well. We expected to win, and we didn't win. Texas beat us. It's still frustrating to me. But they have a couple good guys. Ben Crenshaw and Tom Kite on that team. And they tied for first, those two guys. And they ended up not having the playoffs, so they were the NCAA champions, co-champions. And we lost by 2 shots. And all of us together threw our trophies, wore our trophies in the garbage. And I kind of wish I had that bad. But we were pretty cocky, you know, when we were young. We thought we deserved to win. I'm going to talk to you right now about some ideas, and then I'm going to do a lot of video. I'm going to do a lot of video in this talk, and I'm going to try and make it right to my end time. I think Archer back there will give me a signal. But it's stuff I love to talk about. If you imagine you're studying physics or researching geology or teaching students what could go wrong in a rocket launch, maybe studying golf swings or studying anything, evidence has to be hammered out. Data is always the king, but it's combined with scientific method. And that means you check the information that you've been told, and you rely on dissenting opinions. That, of course, means me today, too. The human brain has weaknesses and flaws. Ideas are filtered and then constructed in your brain. And this is called confirmation bias. That is based on results from the tendency to process and analyze information so it supports your pre-existing ideas and convictions. The brain updates into a default mode, making it easy to rationalize your opinion. That's confirmation bias. Has this ever happened to you? Once you learn something, you tell yourself, I did it all along. I always do that. Or the first time you learn a new word, suddenly you hear that word 2 or 3 times the next day. You become aware of something new in a golf swing, and then you see it all the time. We believe a story we tell ourselves, but sometimes it's based on flawed information, and a lot of people can be wrong. Is the method of the statement made by a teacher or some TV commentator true? It can be very convincing stuff. The talk can be strong. It can be inspirational, and it can be hopeful. Theories, though, need to be examined because it may or may not be true. Critical examination is a fix. As we know, some teachers have done a 360-degree turn in their beliefs. It's hard to appreciate the potential of your own self-deception. Beliefs are extremely strong. If you think of politics, or you think of your children, you believe there's a monster in the closet. Beliefs are really strong. If you think you're not biased and that you don't rationalize yourself, this is the greatest bias of all. We all have erroneous beliefs. It will happen often, especially if you don't have critical thinking. Also remember that memorization is a skill, and it can make a person sound very smart. If you think of actors, they memorize long scripts of complicated information, and they can pound it right out. It's an amazing skill. There are people that have memorized the Bible. That's pretty impressive. And there's probably somebody standing on a stool in downtown Houston pontificating this morning that sounds like a Harvard PhD. Today I'm going to show you some past great ball strikers and great champions and some modern stars. And I'm going to speak a little bit more about confirmation bias as I go through the presentation. Starting in 1992, my staff had drought. I was a club professional for 19 years up in New York. I love it. And also I had a winter and summer job. I was in Palm Springs too, Ranch Garage. But at Durrell, we videotaped every player every year. Obviously, we had a tour there. And then we did detailed studies. That gave me a lot of years, 30 to 45 detailed reports on many aspects of what the tour players were doing in their swings. So I had the guys or girls look at one thing. What's the head doing? What's the right shoulder doing? What's the right foot doing? Whatever. We looked at body movements, club shaft positions, length of the swing, foot action, and these are all great things for our Monday meetings. Every Monday we had a meeting with just the teachers and the assistants. And we have topics to go over. So these were great topics to go over. But a decade before this, starting in the 80s, I did these studies with just one guy. His name was Carl Welke. Carl grew up in Southern California and worked for Hall of Fame star player and teacher Paul Runyon at the Hawaii Adventure Club. Carl played his college golf for San Diego State and set up his golf school at the La Costa Resort. Trudino lived there, Scotty Cameron lived there, and Carl did a lot of work with the Callaway company there. At La Costa, he became great friends with a guy named Bill Glasson, who had worked for Howard Hughes Aircraft and Howard Hughes Missile. Bill Glasson was involved in the first space launch in NASA. He graduated #1 out of MIT. Carl taught Bill golf, and Bill taught Carl a lot about how to do research. In 1966, Carl asked Bill Glasson to build him a speed machine. And Bill did it. I guess he just whipped it up in his garage, no problem. And then in 1972, he asked him to build a machine that could measure club path and club face control. And that's still around. That machine's, his son, Craig Welke, who's a really good teacher too, up in Seattle, has that machine. And still, it really works good. I mean, it's really close to tracking. An interesting story about Bill Glasson was when he retired from Hughes. And the guys at Golf Craft knew about it. He was a big golfer, he loved golf, and he did a lot of stuff at his home. They hired him at Golf Craft. And one of the main things they wanted him to do was build a robot that could hit golf balls, so he could test the equipment. Golf Craft was the biggest manufacturer in the world at that time in San Diego. Have you ever heard of Golf Craft? You heard that name? They had the fiberglass shafts and stuff like that. Very used to anyway. He could that robot, he built it, could hit the ball, carry the ball 280 yards. And it became the forerunner to the Iron Bar machine. And interestingly, in 1968, they sold the company to another company, Timers, like that. So that's where Timers got a lot of their stuff down in San Diego. I met Carl in 1969. He moved up to Seattle to open the Sahali Golf Club. Ryan was hired from La Jolla to come up to Sahali. I don't think you've ever heard of Sahali Golf Club. It's the most famous course up in the Northwest. Great place. Anyway, he opened that up, and when he was up there, I was playing pretty good golf, and he contacted me and wanted to film me. Because that's what Carl did. You know, he was I'll explain to you a little more about Carl. He just had this desire to learn about the golf swing. Back then, he had an 8mm camera. That's what he filmed me with. It took 2 weeks to get the film back. And then he had a little roller thing, and we could watch my swing. It was really cool back then. I was about 19 years old. And he also had a sequence camera, where you shot with a Polaroid sequence camera, and you pulled out the film, and there were 8 pictures of it. And then when I went to Westchester Country Club, that was my first job. I played for a few years after college. And then I went to teach up there. And I bought one of those. And I wrote a book called The 8-Step Swing. And that's kind of where it came from. You get four back swings and 4 down swings. Anyway, we became friends then. I started seeing him a lot in Seattle. And then we started studying golf. And that lasted for about 50 years. Carl passed away in 2018. You would not believe the study, the detail, and the effort that this guy did. Carl showed me how to research golf swings. We started our first major study, our first major study in 1980. And that's because the VCR came out in that year. And I went down to Crazy Eddie's in New York, was the name of the place, and bought a Sony Betamax, and we were off and running. Carl already had a huge collection of film that he'd done, and it's an amazing amount of stuff, little packets of film that he had. But then the VCR came, that was VHS videotape. It was so much better. And I went out every year to La Costa during the tour event, Tournament of Champions, and we filmed the players there. And what was amazing was you could film during the tournament. We put the tripods right out during the tournament. We filmed during Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but actually during the tournament, nobody cared. So that doesn't happen, that much anymore. It's tough to film. Well, everybody's got an iPhone out there now, but it's tough to get it. They won't let you bring a tripod out very easily and set up. So our first study was to see if there were any commonalities. What were the common things that all the great players did? Back then we used major championship winners. So we would, try and figure out. It was difficult. What would be the same? The swings were so different, but what would be the same? Were there any things the same? And I had come up with a different idea. And Carl's thing, he always said, is show me the videotape. I would have something that I heard from the teacher or whatever, or that I thought of myself. Show me the videotape. That became my mantra too. Show me the videotape. The school of Carl Welty was tough. It was a heck of a lot tougher than my sorry study habits at the University of Houston. I can tell you that. He was tough on me, and we really studied. We really studied hard. A lot of times at 2, 3 in the morning. Before I go to the videotape, I'd like to share with you 8 things that my staff does that are filming. Number 1, you have to be precise with your videotaping like great players. And I'm not saying you have to do this with all the average players you work with, but if you're going to study with great players, or the better players do, or you have a good student coming to you, it'd be nice to film the same way, off a tripod. Number 2, tape all the tour players all the same way. 3, all teachers are trained in correct filming. It's a must. 4, filming straight down the target line is critical. Where is the ball going? Think track map or any watch monitor. 5, bad clips are thrown out. 2, 3, 4 clips per day at a tour event is a very successful day. Was the clip 7, was the clip framed up perfect, did the player get a good shot? 8, did you have the shutter speed correct so you could see the club face in all locations? A little recap, in 1992, I opened my school at Doral. We began filming all the players. We had 156 players in the field. We filmed all of them. Same thing with PGA West, that started in 1994. We had the MX tournament. It was called Bob Hope when I started. And we filmed there. Then in the 2000s, when I went to Mayakoba, where we had the tour event this last week, Myron Nelson and the Colonial, where we had my hospital up in Fort Worth. There's some great teachers up there. Also, I had a place at Liberty National. When I was in New York, I was also at a place that had a senior tour event at Sleepy Hollow. And when I was at Westchester Country Club, we had a tour event there. So, access. I had easy access. My staff had easy access to do the videotaping and to do it correctly. And it was easy to do it on Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. Now in Miami, 2 golf schools. We have 22 teachers plus 7 assistants in Miami. And I've got other locations, 3 of them outside of the United States. Soon I'm going to show you how we use, how Carl and I use the dry erase pen on the TVs. When I worked with Carl, we had two TVs, two VCRs, and we did side-by-side video comparisons. And that's kind of what Bill Glasson and Carl worked on together, so you could do a comparison and also draw on the TV. So we did that for quite a few years before we sort of told anybody. Kind of just did it ourselves. And then I later showed it to a couple of people, but I think we did that for quite a few years without too many people knowing about it. I'd say there's definitely been an evolution in teaching, no doubt about that. Teaching kind of keeps better and better all the time. For me, having new assistants each year, it's helped me a ton because you got to stay on your game. It's important to keep an open mind, especially with so much information available to us now. And it's conflicting information. And that's because there are many ways to be great. We're going to look at some of that now. Listen carefully to the speakers in this seminar. Expand your knowledge. You really don't have much to teach if you don't do the research. So I'm going to move on here to the more fun part, get on this videotape. I'm trying to kind of time this out. Just make sure oh wait, first of all, yeah, just show you. This is the original golf machine. I better say here for a minute. That's the original golf machine book. It was green, so most of you have, if you read the golf machine, which is very tough to read, by the way. Very tough. A lot of it not necessary. My dad was an engineer from Hawaii and a very good player. After he retired, later on, he played in 3 United States senior amateurs. But he could read the book for me, and I went to Homer Kelly's house in Seattle, close to my house, and spent a whole afternoon with him. And then I played with Ben Doral, and Ben and I were good friends. I took a lot of lessons from Ben. He came to my facility in Texas to the schools. He tried to explain the book to me also. I don't know if any of you knew Ben Doral spoke so soft, he was kind of, really lean in and hear what he was saying. But that book was 1969. So there's a tremendous amount of teachers that are still using the golf machine in the language in that book. So there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying it's old stuff. These are the positions out of the book. So for me, when I started doing my research, and research I did with Carl, and deep research I did with my students, I didn't like the positions. I love positions because I think all teachers that I go to, whether they say they teach positions, whether they criticize positions, they teach positions too. So we got quite a few spots here before we just get to the top. Anyway, those are some of the books. Why have you seen this? How's that look? Now, this is how we drew on the TV. We just took a black marker or whatever, we draw on the TV. And one of the things that I started to notice, this was in the 80s, was X, not the X factor, the X that the shaft made. So the golf club on the PGA Tour, the golf club would go up more vertically and lay down. And when you drew the lines, I noticed this movement. So it's obviously called shallow in the golf club now. So we get the club up and shallow down. Now, almost every single player did that. There were some exceptions back then. Raymond Floyd took the club a long ways inside. You roll the club, got the club in here, and had a giant, a reverse slot. Right? You come this way, but the shaft really didn't tip this way. But it didn't make the X. So there were a few. It didn't actually cross the line. But it was still an interesting thing. You didn't show me which one to point to. And then when I dropped just the right one. This one, this side. Yeah, so this is right here. All right. Now, this is what I started doing a long time ago. I started looking at golf swings, and for me, playing a lot and playing with great players, one would be Bruce Linsky for sure, and Mahaffey. I mean, they're all very different swings. I played a lot with Lanny Watkins. You know, it's just unbelievable swing. And hit is so great. One of the greatest ball strikers I ever played with. With a lot of funk in the swing, a lot of different things in there. Just ripped it. He had so much confidence. A lot of guys I played with in Texas here. So I came up with safety zones. And let's see if I can. So this gigantic safety zone was the takeaway. So we filmed straight down the line. That's the way Carl showed me. And we've been very consistent. So we have, as long as you put the camera in the same place, that's fine. If you're moving the camera, obviously, that's bad research. You have to have things similar, the same, so you can compare. So that's the way we have the camera set 50 to 54 inches, you know, some little corridor right there, but up high, and the same way off the tripod. So that would be this would be the safety zone for the takeaway. Now, does everybody make it in there? No. Matthew Will's not going to make it in there. And there's a few others. But this mostly gives everybody that if you get outside this, the way I train my teachers, if you're outside this, that's probably something you're going to change. But the easiest thing, guys, to teach is a perfect backswing. So you can teach everybody the same thing, put the glove, you know, parallel to the target line, and then somewhere here, perfect at the top, perfect on the way down, perfect on the way. Of course, be a good player. This is where you have to be good. Halfway down, halfway through. That's it. But the backswing is pretty overrated because everybody's different. It is easy for a teacher to teach backswing because it's slow. In golf terms, it's easy. You can see, you don't need a camera. You can see it. So there's a lot of backswing teachers because it's easy. Downswing tough. It happens in 1/5 of a second. So that's a lot tougher. This is the main safety zone, which was just a line up the shaft and a line, a Hogan plank over the shoulders. So most famous picture in golf is painted glass over Hogan's shoulders. Well, I'm going to put Hogan up there in a second. And, you know, it's a cool thing. And that's a great image for a lot of players. And a lot of great players use that. So, let me go forward. Sometimes when I do my golf schools, I try to make things simple. The driver's at a 45-degree angle, which is pretty good. So usually now it's 45 inches probably, and it's at a 45-degree angle. So you get the 4 to 90 and the wall that, let's say, in between the verticals and the horizontal is 45. So that just kind of gives people a nice little image of how to set up. So I kind of use that driver for everybody. I divide golfers for our teaching into beginners, guys who are going to top golf, some infrequent players, to the intermediate players, which is by far the most that we teach. The intermediate players we teach. This is a lot of hands and arms, a lot of centeredness. This is weight shift, inside attack, getting a draw, and advance is the opposite of this, is passive hands. More big muscles, feeling of less face rotation. Anyway, that's kind of the way I done it. All right. There's our takeaway, safety zone. There's different ideas that came from, you know, my time with Ben Doyle, actually, you know, we had the random, the sweep, and the late takeaway. So we could have it setting the club early, setting it where you're not thinking about it, it just kind of sets on its own, or a late set at the top. Now it turns out that guys use different sets. With the driver, the greatest drivers are the late setters, pretty much. They get a lot of width, they get wide, let's go Adam Scott, Tiger Woods, Jack Nicklaus, Bruce Litzky, you know, as you go through the guys that are driving the ring. We get a lot of width in the backswing. But then, at the same time, like Hogan had a tremendous amount of width on his driver, but then he's narrower on his pitching wedge and sandwich. So the thing is, the swing's not the same. It's not the same. Now, 14 different clubs, 14 different lines, 14 different lengths, 14 different address shaft planes. So there is no one plane. It's all different. And you add on, especially in other parts of the country, not so much Houston, uphill, downhill, side hill, lies. And that makes things tougher. So for me, as we go through the different steps or sections of the swing, when we get to section 3, which is when the club gets to the 3/4 position, say left arm parallel, and I'm looking to see if that club is in this safety zone. Hogan said, if your left arm would lay right on the Hogan plane over the shoulders, push right against it, or be under. That's what he talked about. So I'm careful about having the club too far out, but when we want Matthew Wolf, he's going to have the club on that side of his head at the top. So you give Yankees a lot of credit. Not changing. Definitely work. This is really important. This was from Carl's impact plane, not address plane. You use impact plane to see what the club's doing in the golf swing, not address plane. Okay, this is another picture we did with Carl. So you have address and impact. Yeah, you all know this, but it's still out there a little bit. Address is the same. Impact and address are the same. They're not even close. You know, there's nothing the same. So I think that was pretty useful right there. I mean, I think what we did in 1980 might be better than what we're doing now, because it was so vivid, it was so clear to the student. It showed them so many cool things. Okay, just a little introduction to Hogan.
The mystique. The Hogan mystique. It wasn't one thing. It was the man. The way he carried himself. The way he dressed. The way he practiced. The way he overcame the odds to become one of the most revered golfers of all time.
You could observe Hogan by the way he dressed. That's the first thing. He would come out immaculately dressed to do anything with custom-made slacks, custom-made shoes, custom-made shirts, every hat, everything that Ben had anything to do with his clubs were immaculate and extremely well designed, well thought out. The shafts, equipment was important to him, and he would start that way.
Yeah, that's Jackie Burke. I'm sure a lot of you have been able to see Jackie. You know Jackie Burke. I spent the afternoon with him yesterday. We went over to Champion, hung out a little bit. He's 99 years old right now, so it's amazing. You know, he's been a super important guy to me. Well, he just had a reverence for Hogan, as did Tamara. Those guys loved Hogan. And everybody I ever talked to, Jack Nicklaus, Gary Flair, Nick Price. When they talk about Hogan, they put him above. That's pretty amazing, but those guys have big egos, man. It's hard to believe where they put Hogan. Like, what did this guy do? I mean, how great was he? When I was in Houston, he'd come down for a week. I got to see him play and practice. He played the Houston Open. His last hole was the fourth hole at the Champions. To finish a bunch of us right there. Tough hole. And he hit a 1-iron that day on number 4 in the Champions. And he gets his first one in and went in the branker at the top. He said, give me another ball. If you're dead, it's like hitting it out of bounds there. Hits another ball, hits 1-iron, goes in the brank again. gets one more ball, hits him right again. Jackie Burke was right there, and he said, Jackie, if you can't get a 1 iron over the bracket, you don't deserve to be out here. Take me in. And that was it. That was a pretty old guy right again. He was an old guy when I watched him, but I watched him play with John McAfee, who was an NCAA, who was the current NCAA champion. He had missed the tours when he went on to work at champions for a year. And Hogan did it further than John. He looked a lot better. But Hogan was just unbelievable. What he did. So we learned a lot from Hogan. I had the opportunity to work with a lot of Hogan's great friends. Ken Venturi, I worked with over 30 years. I played a couple hundred rounds with him. And Gardner Dickinson, I spent a lot of time with. Gardner dressed like him, so did Venturi. But Gardner dressed like him, kind of moved like him, and they called Hogan the Hawk, and they called Dickinson the Chicken Hawk. Dickinson won 9 times on the PGA Tour. He was a pretty good player. Made a Ryder Cup team. 63 Williams Iron majors. In the 1940s, for a decade, Hogan was the leading money winner every year he played, except America beat him in 1947. He was second. He entered the Army in 1943, 44, 45, so he missed those years. And then in 1949, he started in January. He went out on the West Coast. He won 2 out of 4 tournaments that he played in. He lost a playoff in another one. And then he was driving back to Fort Worth and he had a car accident, which was a tragic accident where the doctor said he would never walk again. No way to play golf, but he did. He came back and never played a full schedule ever. But in 1953, he won all 3 majors. And we had that ticker tape parade for him in New York. He won all 4 majors. So this is Hogan in 1948. I wrote a book on Hogan, and this is a picture I used. I made the clips out of them. And Hogan said this was the best he ever played. It wasn't a writer that said it was the best he ever played. It wasn't another player that said, well, this is when Hogan played his best. This is when Hogan said he played his best. That's a Riviera in 1948. So there's some interesting things to look at here. Well, I'm going to slow it down for you again. I think it's always fun to watch Hogan, the rhythm of the swing, the beauty of the swing. But then we can actually break it down and start to, go through things. So people for years would say, and Hogan would say in the book, that don't move your head. The head's the center point. That was the thing with the golf machine. That was the #1 fundamental in the golf machine. The head is a post. So then, those are the things that I was skeptical about. I'm still skeptical about. When guys tell me something, my #1 thing is I don't believe them. I just sit there and I go to the videotape. So we can see Hogan had a pretty good drift. DeMeritt Hogan sway. So Hogan had a sway away from the ball. DeMeritt was his best friend. A lot of width right here. Pretty good move. Hogan this is a big thing for me that I learned from playing, and I worked for Venturi for one winter in Florida. Starting down, Hogan went downhill, and then started down. It looked to me like a fall forward. This movement, and Venturi described it by the left shoulder leaving the chin. So those guys were pretty smart. We've learned a lot now. We have learned a lot. And I think people say things better than I do, for sure. But they knew a lot. And a lot of great stuff. Hogan hit into a bow, for sure. But then went into a nice straight balance, pretty straight balance finish. Up on the right toe, he definitely got to his left side, the head. In fact, this is a pretty good sitting right here. So this is going, this is a way of studying. You have your ways of studying video or studying sending tour players to see what's really happening. How do you work with your students? What are you looking at? So you can see how we brought the club the hands inside on the takeaway. So that would be something a lot of teachers would probably take away now. It's a little bit under the plane on the backswing. And he has a little bit of power on the way down. So in this picture right here, we have not moved these lines, but I moved it here. And I just put it on impact line. And when you come down to watch over, these are some pretty good things that we all should talk about. It's this right forearm is right on shaft line. And you can also kind of see that he's right on top of it. This is something I started doing with Carl a long time ago, and I called it exit plane. I don't know. I haven't invented that many things in my life. But that might be one of them, but you never know. Maybe somebody's done that before. This is Sam Sneed. So I could come back and I'm going to do a little, there's going to be some Q&A after this, which honest to God I didn't look at. But we'll see. I don't care what I'm asked. It's okay. So Sam Sneed, I did a video with Sam. I went to his house for 3 days. I stayed with him at the Masters twice. I asked him a million questions. He was awesome to talk to. Absolutely the greatest. Told a lot of dirty jokes. That was a big thing at the Masters. Byron Nelson was always horrified when he got up there, but we listened. And Sam was a country boy. He grew up in West Virginia. Country strong guy. He started with a wooden stick that he played golf with. Now, I taught Jerry West, and this I'm going way back for some of you, but Jerry West is the logo for the NBA. He was considered one of the greatest basketball players in the history of the game. One day at Doral, I was talking to him about who he thought, we were just talking about getting lunch. Who was the greatest athlete you ever saw? And this was in the 90s, so I thought he was going to say Michael Jordan, probably, because that's what everybody was saying. But I was thinking, well, he's played with Wilt Chamberlain, and Wilt averaged 50 for the year one year, and he scored 100 points in one game. And maybe he'll say Wilt. Maybe it'll be Jim Brown or some running back in football. He said Sam Sneed, the greatest athlete he ever saw, which was really, I said, wow, I never expected that. And he said Sam was the best basketball player, the best baseball player, the best football player, the greatest track runner in the state of West Virginia when he grew up. He's the greatest fisherman he's ever seen, and he could shoot a rifle better than anyone he's ever seen in accuracy. He's just a freak. When he was 70, he could stand on one foot, but the other leg, I can't get it up to about right here. He put it straight up over the top of his head. And you've probably seen him do that with some pictures on Instagram with 70 Ballesteros. He was kind of double jointed. He could take his thumb back, put it all the way back. He could do things right and left-handed. Just unreal. Now, we know Sam, or it was called the Sam Sneed squat. Down, the knees looked like they separated. And he had a lot of movement down with the legs, ground force reaction. And I know a lot of teachers use Sneed as an example to this day. A lot of people think that Sam had the most beautiful golf swing, the most powerful golf swing of all time. Harvey Pennick, I did a lot of interviews for the PGA. When they interviewed all these great teachers. I went to see Harvey in Austin. And I said, Harvey, I got to ask you this question. This is a true story about you and going to Pinehurst to play in the North and South Bowl. He said, yeah, it's true. He went out and the members sponsored him to go play in the tour event when he was at Austin Country Club. Harvey was a good player. And he took the train all the way out there, unpacked at Pinehurst. Went out to the range, just 8 balls. There was a guy down at the end of the range, he's a natural teacher, so he's just kind of stepped away and was watching this guy get lost. So, God, this guy's really how good this guy is. And he asks his who is that? And he asks him the question, well, that's Samson. Oh, wow, yeah. Must be, so he went sauntered down and watched Sam hit some balls. And then Sam went to the first tee. He said, I walked to the first tee. Sam hit a 300-yard bullet. You know, I don't know what the ball was back then. Just ripped the driver. And Harvey went back to the hotel and repacked and went home. Never played the tournament. There's no way I can play with that. So this is just a couple of pictures of Sam. I mean, I can show you. I got so much stuff to show you in this talk. I want to make sure I get through it. You give me a hand when how much time do we got? 45 minutes. Before we do the questions? Total. So I got about 15 minutes. I got to do necklace. So there's Jack in the PGA, 5, 6 Masters, 4 U.S. Opens, 3 British Opens, but he had 6 runner-ups, and he finished in 18 years. His worst finish was 6th. This is Jack in 1972, a Carl Mulkey video. It's a little different angle, but it's still kind of, I let that 45-degree angle in front just for watching how the body moves. So Jack definitely lifted the left heel. Those are definitely things we can talk about. This is Jackie. Now there was a commentator that said that Jack and Bryson did the same thing, where the head goes up and the backswing. Well, Bryson's head goes up early in his backswing, and then it goes down. And Jack actually did just the opposite. His head goes down and then it goes up late. So actually it's the opposite. And you can see it right here. That's why you gotta watch here. You gotta listen to what people are saying. Jack, of course, had this high right arm, which he was criticized for, flying right elbow, super late release, set, setter, very late, didn't create that 90-degree angle. This is about a 7. There's where he goes up. And he stays up. Jack's not going down. So when you say with the ground force reaction, you're going to go down and get power. Jack, Carl measured him one time with that speed machine. So he measured a lot of guys, but it's tough to get those superstars. And Jack was going to dinner, and we've been to La Costa. The range is located next to the clubhouse. There's a place where you walk down and have dinner right behind the range. Jack was walking down, and he said, Jack, come get a ball in the machine. So he took out his sport coat, made one swing, and 127 miles an hour. Jack broke inserts. We used to have inserts. Screws were in there. He broke lots of drivers. And he just hit the ball so much further than anybody. He just, like all the great players, they're all the greatest players are super long. So these are, you can Jack took a little inside too, up and right down that impact plane. Interesting, when Jack finished, he had a shaft parallel to that plane finish. Trevino. I spent quite a bit of time in the league. I did CNBC, did the CNBC work for a while, did a lot of commentary. I don't know if I touched something. So, 2 U.S. Opens, 2 British Opens, 2 PGAs. When I was at Sleepy Hollow, we won the senior tour event there. I spent a lot of time with him, watching how he practiced. This was at Sleepy. He had a club almost the opposite of Hogan, really shut, took it out of his backswing, out of the backswing, dropped it really like Sergio Garcia. Really love right side bend, tremendous amount of drop going through it. And just a phenomenal ball striker. A lot of people that I've talked to ranked him right up there with Hogan. He idolized Hogan. Went to watch him Shady Oaks a lot. And he wanted to hit it like him, but of course he couldn't. He was in low hooks. Still a great hustler, still a great player. And he just kept aiming. He told me I just started aiming more to the left until I could hit the inside part of the ball and fade it. So it worked for him. He aimed so far to the left, it's just unreal. He would, some of you might remember Bill Etchenbrenner in El Paso. So that's fun. Lee started, quit school when he was 14, went to caddy at TAC. Joined the Marines when he was 17, 4 years in the Marines. When he went down with Etchenbrenner, they would run in the morning, and then they played 18 holes in the morning, and then they played 18 holes in the afternoon. So Trino played 36 a day. And then they played those big money games down there. And that's why the Titanic Thompson brought Raymond Floyd, this that famous story about Raymond Floyd down to play a big money match with Trevino. And Raymond, again, I know Raymond pretty well. I asked him the story. He said, well, I shot 65 the first 2 rounds, and Trevino shot 63, 64 in the 8 both days. And they had the third day, they had another big match. I mean, a lot of people came out, and you know, those West Texas boys have got a lot of money down there. A lot of people in Texas are the greatest gambling states in the world. They have a ton of money back. And Raymond shot 63 on the third day, and Trevino lived out, shot 64. And it's like couldn't get out of there fast enough. And then he never hurt. And then Trevino the next year qualified for the U.S. Open and finished 5th. And they got him in all the tournaments. And starting in the U.S. Open, he was the Rookie of the Year. And then the next year, he won the U.S. Open. So he hit it to a kind of soft left knee. Had to do Freddie, Houston guy, had to put him in because a lot of people that I teach, I mean, not so much now because the young kids don't know that these older players, but everybody wanted to be Freddie. Wanted to swing like Freddie Cummings. It was so much fun to watch him. And he went to the University of Houston. He's from Seattle. I know Freddie forever. Also the flying elbow, case is open at the top. We worked with Paul Marchand mostly and Kip Harmon, but they didn't change that. An elbow like this. Buffalo Watson's another one, of course, with an arm like that. He's also the #1 ball striker on the PGA Tour and the World Tour. You got to give people a lot of credit. He worked for a guy from Seattle named Steve Cole at the range for everything. This is Freddie at Corral in 1992. One of my favorite. And man, because you see that's a wooden glove. So like Hogan and a lot of players, you know, they start back and the club's the last thing to leave. And the head's always back. It's a good driver from the bad position. Lidsky. How much time? Lidsky, when you talk about who had the greatest swing in the history of golf, maybe say Bruce Litsky because maybe 9 times #1 in total driving, 200 leader greens regulations. He did great every day. I asked him, what's the worst day you ever had on the tour? He said, I think I hit 11 one day. Terrible. He stayed with me, but not always, and sometimes for Doral. When I was down there for all those years. And one day, he shot 75 the first round. He always played great at Doral. He shot 75. So we had dinner that night. And I said, Lakey, what happened? He said, well, just didn't hit my irons today, didn't I? I said, well, would you ever think about going to the range after the round, after a day like that, and hitting balls? He goes, no, why would I do that? I said, well, because you're going to have to shoot really low tomorrow when you cut. He said, look, I just told you I hit my irons bad today. Why would I go practice when I'm swinging that? Now, well, I'll just go to bed tonight. I'll wake up, probably have my normal iron game, and I'll play tomorrow. Shot 66. True story. That's how we done. He never practiced. I lived with him in college, and then we lived together for a year on pro golf. And then we were great friends forever. He loved Whataburgers. And had a Dr. Pepper machine in his house. It was branched down in the south of Dallas. He had a 12-car garage. He had 3 lakes on his property. He never worried about a swing. Never. Just hit this shot all day long. The left side of the property did not exist. That's Freddie United. That's the tournament champions. He had that move, I taught that to so many players. One of them, George Zaringer, was made the Ryder Cup and Walker Cup team for America. He lived in New York City, 4 kids. I think in New York, living in downtown New York, used to work in Wall Street. Tough to be a good player doing that. But I always had George had that little move, and we worked on the Litsky swing, really. I didn't know what I was doing when I started, but I knew that he was great. And he took away that hook, and he ended up with the greatest record in the history of the Metropolitan area, won everything. He's been the low amateur 3 times in the Senior Open, made cuts 7 times in the Senior Open. But you don't get credit, right? We don't get credit for working with amateurs. I'm up here because I work with tour players. I've worked with a lot of great tour players. From going way back with Peter James and Kai Fax and Matisse, and Keaton Bradley, and Lexi Thompson, and Kristen Kerr. That's how you get well known, right? It's tough to teach regular people. So there's a lot of people that don't get the credit for teaching. I'm going to talk about that at the end here. Kind of got to get lucky teaching. This is Annika Sorensen. So Annika had a really different deal, Again, a really late setter, great driver. I never saw anybody hit a ball straighter than Annika Sorensen. Absolutely straight. Like a machine. Just unreal. 70 LPGA wins. Retired young. She was taught by Jimmy Ballard. That's really different. He's big move, more width, and you see her big finish. It's a pretty good finish, but not hurting the back. That's a big thing. Very stand up forward tall. She didn't drop down either. All right, Tiger. That's my favorite clip of Tiger. That was the first goal. That was Doral. He won there 3 times. He played there a year. He had one time when he played with Phil Mickelson in the last round. It was 2 back. There was 25,000 people at least following that group. It's unbelievable. all the way around. Tiger shot, Phil shot 69, 300, and Tiger shot 66. And he finished second a couple of times. We filmed Tiger every shot, every shot he hit, every year. Every shot. Drivers, second shots, chips, pitches, everything. So we got a pretty good study on him. There's that move right here, guys. That downhill move. Or at least that's what I call it, kind of, that separation. That was a 600 hit from about 220, 2000 on par 5. So there's a lot of ways, there's a lot of different things you can use to watch how the swing goes. This is kind of 2000, the foot is kind of right up and then right down that same green line. That green line is in McLean, so you can see that close from here, let's say here under. Back and up. You could study 1,000 positions, but if you're going to stop the camera, you've got to be able to look at something. You've not used positions. So I'm definitely a position teacher. But when I teach people, I'm teaching the first thing wrong. Address positions first, and then what do you do to get started? Some kind of condition. And then your first move here at the beginning, taking the triangle away. So you're going to just lift, leave the center at home. Where are you halfway back? Halfway back. I'm not fanatical about having certain exact positions because it's too many different ways. You could be an early rotator, you could be a bigger hip turn, less hip turn. This guy, his name Wilco. You've seen Wilco's name on professional golf. His ball speed's about 215. It's just ridiculous. Swinging 140 miles an hour. No hip turn. Smallest hip turn I've seen. So people tell me, oh, you need a big hip turn to get it long ways. Really? How does he do it? He's got the smallest hip turn. Tiger had a very small hip turn too. Tiger was so long when he first came out when he was a kid. I walked. He played with Brad Faxon in the practice round when he was 17 or 18. An exemption to play in the Honda. He hit 80 to 100 past Faxon. He was unreal. Just here to the parking lot here. To the driving range. Yeah, unbelievable. He weighed about 130 pounds. All right. That's set Tiger's clubs that I bought that set. It's an exact replica. It's in a box and it has these things on it. What he did in 1999. These are the tournaments he won. Motorola, PGA, Pro Golf Champion, National Tour Championship. Nice little 9-win season. Then 2000 Mercedes, AT&T, Eddie Gill, Memorial, U.S. Open, British Open, PGA, won 3 in a row. Majors. And he finished with the World Golf Championship and the Canadian Open. Then he went the next year and won the Masters 4 in a row. So it's just like, wow. Then, why don't we change our swing? Wow. But that was like the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. I just won 4 majors. I didn't love everything, wasn't getting long. I'm going to change my swing from there. Really interesting. And he did it a number of other times. And he made it work. It took him a couple of years, and he made it work. He played great. And after being work, well, if we start right at the beginning, he used Sam Snead was his model. Right? Earl Woods had pictures of Sam Snead. He called Tiger Sam at home. That's his name, Sam. Who did? What name did Tiger name his daughter? Sam. So you think Sam Snead had some serious impact on Tiger Woods? Huge. All right, let's see what they go here. Now, I wrote this book on what the body does. That's an SMT machine. We've not used a lot of technology in my life. Had biomechanics in 1994. That's Christopher. She was just the last 2 days at Gilmore. She was seeing. As a like tour player, I was supposed to meet her because I had to fly to Houston. I told her, meet me. She wasn't working. Meet me at 9. She had a few things to do. She said, I can be there at 9. I said, I have to leave at 10:30. The flight. When did she arrive? Since she picked the tour player. 10:30. So I had her just work and stuff. But anyway, that's how tour players are. You go to meet them at 8 o'clock in the morning, they come at 11. That's the way it is. Okay, here's some more swing studies. 40% of the PGA Tour players right now lift their left heel and backswing. By lifting the left heel, I'm saying, does it come off the ground? Yes or no? So if it's just a little, we still count. How many players go up? That's a big thing right now. You need to go up and then go down to the far. Well, only 3. Here's some pictures of the guys. I'm going to get through this quick. This is John Ron. He's again leg setter, really short, super bowed left elbow, skinny left wrist. And then he's got a lot of lean on that. Daniel Berger, he gets up at that position to the top. Right? If you were a teacher, you're kind of laying it off that much. Would you let him do it? Would you keep it? Would you allow that to happen? He's got a little Lidsky in it too. He's got a little over the top of this. You know, when you say, hey, wait, that's going to work. Well, Bobby Cole, my teacher, that was his teacher. Bobby Cole played the tour for 22 years. And a great friend of mine. He didn't change it. Dustin Johnson had that big forward press, very little hip turn. Been number one or right around number 1 for a long time. I'm going to go through these quick. So there's Dustin White. I think he makes a little bit of a turn with his upper body. The X factor, of course, is the differential between the shoulders and the hips going back. I actually wrote the first article was the 4 turns in the swing, is the hips turns, the shoulders turn, the hips turn, and the knees turn. So I kind of looked at the ratio of those. But we made it simple, the X factor. Look how much he went down on the traction here. Worked out, super weak left hand grip. I'm going to go quick. Look at that picture there. Goes down a lot. I see most guys, not all of them, but most guys go down in the backswing. Gantley, bent left elbow. A lot of great players. I mean, we used to think that was wrong. And Carl Wilkie always talked to me about the elbow going at the target and going down. This club. I've got this jacket on. Okay. Shapley. What a player, man. So he lifts his heel just a little bit right there. So look at this impact. Come down and back. He's a small guy who kills it. He's swinging about 119, 120. You can hit a long ways to that. He can go harder. Some of the guys are Justin Thomas and McElroy 123, 24, 25. Terry Woodland 126. That's many guys at 130. Cameron can't. He's a real deal. He looks like he's swinging easy to me. He's at 130, no problem. I'm pretty sure he could go harder if he wanted to. And then there's little guys. It's ridiculous. See how good. This is Justin Thomas. Of course, he goes airborne, right? And in fact, he is off the ground. So he has what we call a body track. It's a Z-trace with just force plates. So you go forward and then just pull back. I taught Lindsay Thompson since she was a little kid, and she had that foot off the ground and move back. And I never took that away. I said that was leverage. A great power move. When she almost won a tournament when she was 14, she won the U.S. Junior when she was 13. And the commentators saw it, and then her dad talked to him and said, geez, her footwork's really bad. Because people don't notice stuff, don't really see it. There's some little thing, but not that much. And a few teachers have talked to them. She's never going to be a great player. Stupid. Now everybody's teaching. Oh, I see. So, Bryce made like a master change. The length just tees it up about this high. And he's trying to get up on it with a 5 or 6 degree driver. Wouldn't think that would work. Swing as hard as he can. Oops, he said, I thought I had to finish it. Where his finishes, he was all the way around. I guess I had a video, but I don't have time. Then Finau's got some different stuff. He has very little shift, a short backswing, big 6'5", just ripped. And he just, the nicest guy in the world. You can see a lot of bend in his left elbow, going through very little face rotation. Goes down quite a bit on his backswing. It starts with his hands way forward. It's just weird, It's a lot of weird stuff. Got the feet up so high. Summerhays teaches a great job. Summerhays has got to be a great guy to speak sometime, man. He's smart. Summerhays is great. Then we got this deal, you got Jordan Spade coming to you. He shoots 61 when he's 11. His brother's in the NBA, playing the NBA. What a family. Just like, wow. How good can he be? So he's got a funny grip, his fingers off the plate, he's got a bend left arm to the top, sways to the outside. But he's got a chicken wing coming through. You don't change him, he wins everything. 4 majors, but it's nice. Says, wow, that's phenomenal to teach you. You teach that. That's something you actually teach people. Then you got Scotty Scheffler from the Texans. And we got footwork going with him, So when you change this, Randy Smith didn't change it. Unreal. So we're thinking, why is that happening? So they're getting some way of being able to keep their arms back inside, I think. They're able to room. They live too close to it, it's hard. But they're not going out that way. Here we go. Big grip. This is the U.S. Open. He finished second at Wingfoot. Look at his club hit, man. Oh, we're going to stop it. We're watching the feet here. So you're the teacher. Yeah, that's fine. Just keep doing that. You're going to be a great coach. This looks great, doesn't it? So that's kind of my answer here. The more you know, the more you know, you don't know. That's kind of where I am. As you study golf, the more I watch, people say, oh, they're like cookie cutters now. Everybody looks the same. No, they don't. They don't look the same. There's a lot of different stuff. There's a lot of different stuff. I'm going to just finish up here. I have a couple little things to say here at the end. In closing, how many teachers actually go to a big tour event and actually film a tour event? I've learned that who talks the most, who talks the loudest, may not be the smartest. Tune up your BS meter. That's what I like to do. That's my closing. Tune up the BS meter. I've heard recently somebody said you can't learn from reading a golf book. Well, you can ask Greg Norman, who learned from Jack Nicklaus's book. You can ask Larry Nelson, who used 5 Lessons, Rover's book, kept in his bag always. You can ask Tiger Woods, who used Sam Snead as his model from the book. The talent code is 10,000 hours. Really? Chunking is the best way to practice. 3, you should practice more. Practice is the key. 4, you should not hit 1,000 balls a day. 5, if you did 10,000 perfect practice, you'd be on the PGA Tour. You could be DJ, you could be Colin Morikawa, you could be Bryce DeChambeau. I don't think so. You should be a rounded athlete. You should do many things. So we hear that. Well, if you look at the greatest people in the history of golf and other things, Steve Jobs, Michelangelo, Elon Musk, Einstein, Warren Buffett, Bryson DeChambeau, works 12 hours a day, every day in golf. Ben Hogan, the same thing. Tiger Woods, the same thing. Bill Gates, Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick said, I don't ever have his life. They're relentlessly committed people. They're relentlessly committed. I found their excellent golf teaching methods. Method teachers on full swing and putting. Which is better? You know, which method is better? Well, at tour events, I've watched 2 guys working on opposite stuff, finish 1-2 in a tournament. The interesting phenomenon to me is the 100% believability that a method teacher has in what they're doing. But I've learned a lot from method teachers in my life. I can go to them. I've learned a lot from them. Great players are supremely gifted. They have great hand-eye coordination. They work hard. They're unbelievably motivated people. They're different. I knew a few because they grew up in my backyard and I gave names Lexi Thompson, Christy Kerr, Eric Thompson. They grew up and I just saw their kids. So I'd say talent is underrated, not overrated. As a teacher, I hope that one of these kids grows up at your facility. I hope you don't change it too much. Don't make it famous. That's it.
Jim, thank you so much. We're going to bring up PGA Director of Instruction at Willows Country Club, Derek Hoover here. He's got a couple Q&A questions preloaded for you. And we'll have a little conversation here to wrap up in the last few minutes.
I promise I didn't. He asked me to do Derek asked me to say quickly. I didn't look in.
Not a problem. You know, I'd like to speak to you like I was going to take it easy. But first of all, thank you for that presentation. That was awesome. I hope everyone else in the room enjoyed that as much as I did. I've got it. Selfishly, I'm going to put my question at the top of the list after that presentation.
Okay.
Would you mind sharing, though, what your process is when you have a student come to you? How do you make the decision as to whether you make a change to what you're seeing or not? You know, with what you showed us here on videos today, there's a lot of things there that many of us in the room would consider changing. Yeah, great instructors could not. Can you share your process for what you decide to change and what not to change?
Well, the first thing I do, we're talking about a good player or anyway.
Well, is that part of your process? Like, is it determined by how good is the player or when you make a change?
Yeah.
So can you share where that delineation is?
Yeah, I talked about it before. You know, I don't work with that many beginners. I do once in a while, but I used to. I taught private clubs for a long time, 15 years, I mentioned. I taught a lot. So I think, you know, at the beginning, you're working a lot more on some narrow stances and pretty good grip and hinging the club and then holding the club, hitting down with the golf ball. You know, just the basics. But a lot of hands and arm stuff. Because this is your connection to the club. We have 2 main connections to golf. The hands to the club and the feet to the ground. And that's where I kind of started looking at this. I don't do too much with the body, beginners, or when I teach people. Teach my, not people, teach my teachers that come to us. So we'll do a lot of work on doing a chip swing, pin swing. This is really from the golf machine. And punch, we can go a little bit further and stop. So that stuff is really hard for people to do. That's really tough. The other thing, though, that the beginners, that I learned from a guy that worked for me, he helped me write these swings, an older guy, he was kind of a different guy. I've learned a lot from different guys. I kind of like a little bit out there. And he was just great with beginners. He would bring them on the golf course and just teach them stuff, like where to stand, things that you kind of omit in the lesson. How to walk up, how to tee your ball up, how high to tee your ball up. Then you let them into your right. See, so I think it's also good to look, not just do these little things, these exercises I mentioned to you that are so great for learning. And that's how you learn to strike a golf ball. But it's also doing some of that stuff, but it's real rudimentary, simple stuff. Then we get to the intermediate player, which is a vast amount of people in my golf schools. And that's when I started doing something called the grind session. We call it body drills. I'll take the club away as a group, and I do it in a regular lesson too. Of course, I'm going to do an assessment before, because it turns out that everybody wants it to be their swing, whether you're on the PGA Tour or you're a beginner. Everybody wants you to work on their golf swing. And a lot of times it's the driver. But there's also the short game, which is chip and pitching, drop shots, all types of putting, all types of bumper shots, all that stuff. So a lot of times that would be it. Then there's the mental game, and then that encompasses a lot of things. Your ability to visualize, your ability to relax, your thinking process, your developing a game plan. And then there's the management part. That's how you're managing your life, your diet, what you're eating, and then managing the golf course. So I think all of us as golf pros, we could probably take an average, for sure, take an average player out of the golf course and tell them nothing about their swing and subtract 5 strokes off their game. So 5 off. We did a thing in Sleepy Hollow. This was from my guy, Dave Collins. He would make a bet with the message, I'm going to take 5 strokes off the game, and I'm not going to say one word to you. No, not one word. And he would just, and he did this, and he would whistle down and take the pin out on every hole, so they didn't know where the flag was. That's all he did. So then they were just trying to hit it on the green from wherever they were. They didn't know where the hole was. And that was a 5 off right there. Anyway, let's get to the better players then. So a better player comes to you, and I'm going to try and figure out, okay, let's say this is the golf swing. We're going to go with the golf swing. Now, if you have somebody that comes to you and they'll tell you that they're a good ball striker, that they hit the ball, they've got some different stuff in their swing, but you got to be really careful with that. These movements that are just not important. What is important is where you are from halfway down to halfway through, and you can see it with a video camera. You don't need a track map. Basically, we're the track map. These 2 eyes, you can see, after you've been teaching a long time, you know that the trajectory is too high or too low, it's spinning too much, there's too much curve. TrackMan's been great for the student in particular, because it gives them that information. Because you can tell somebody, yeah, you're too steep on that swing, but when they see it in the numbers, it's great. So I've had a lot of TrackMan for a lot of times. It's tremendously useful. I'm not sure I made it to your question, by the way. But then I'm going to watch them hit balls, and I'm going to look for those fundamentals that Carl and I did way back, and then my staff's helping with. So I'm looking at things that are fundamental moves. So if they're doing something a little bit opposite, let's say I worked with Bobo fairly recently, and he got on the PGA Tour, finished 128 last year, so we'll see if he can back up it. He'd been playing all over the world, basically, trying to get on the PGA Tour. And when he came through, he was shot. I did a few things with him, one lesson, and then he really wanted to start working. So So when he went through, he had a release where he turned the face over and the club went a little bit out to the right. So I said, well, that's not good. You know, that's something I don't see great players do. So I talked a lot about how the club releases after impact. It goes, the club head should go back on a full swing, not a wedge, but on a full driver swing. The club swings back to the inside in front of your hands. So it's not very complicated, but that is important because, and I do see people, there are other people teaching things where they try to pull the club out to the right and hold on to it. But that's not what I've seen great. But anyway, so with Bo, we worked on that part of the swing to take this, the two-wayness of this game, get a bit of the two-wayness. He was playing the Canadian tour at the time, and then he had no status. He got on the right in Corn Ferry, and then a couple of years ago he won the Corn Ferry, got on the PGA tour, had a good year. But then you got to keep doing it. The tour's so tough right now, and it has been for quite a few years, but then you get the new 25 guys coming out every year. There's all these great college players. And think of all the great college players playing right now, maybe 2 or 3 of them out of this class have been making. There's 5 guys playing University of Houston, University of Texas, SMU, and watch those guys, they all look great. Yeah,
So you work with players from all walks of life, all different skill levels. Any suggestions you can give us to how you deal with the multitude of personalities that you deal with as well?
Yeah, we get a lot of personalities. I know you do. Well, that's part of being a good coach, a good teacher. You just got to be able to roll with the punches. And the number one thing is to find out what they want. I think a lot of teachers don't do that. So when you talk to them, why are you here? What are you doing? How do you feel about your game? How do you feel about yourself? Are you tense? Are you comfortable playing? A lot of the students I work with, just the average person, they've got a lot of tension in their body. They've got a lot of stress. They're too tight with everything. It's amazing what you can do. Just going some type A personalities. And there's crazy people we're working with. And there's some people that just don't want to hear what you have to say that much. They're going to just stick with what they're doing when they got there. And they think they're going to get better. That's going to happen. And it's amazing to me that some people play terrible golf and they enjoy the game.
The thing I find interesting you said there, Jim, is that the people that are coming to see you are paying considerably more than what the people that come to see us, and yet they still don't know so much about to say, even though they're investing that much money.
Yeah.
What do you find is the biggest difference between working with elite players and your average players?
You know, it comes down to with the elite players, they don't want any BS. They like to get to the point. I think a lot of the good players need assurance. They're not as confident as you think. They need somebody to pat them on the back a little bit, for sure. I think you need a good eye. I think if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to be discovered very fast. You can have a great Instagram account, but you get out there on the lesson team. You're really out there with a top player. You got to have a good knowledge base to do it. I see all the teachers out there that are working with tour players. They're very confident guys or girls, and they're very knowledgeable. They're not stumped on too many questions. And if you are stumped, I think it's better not to say anything. Not to just say, well, try this and try this and try that. That's a bad formula.
I think we would agree, you'll probably recognize that as having one of the best assistant training programs in the country, if not the world. Any suggestions you can give to us who are training assistants and assistant professionals at our cost?
Yeah, I mentioned my dad was working with Boeing aircraft. And, he taught me a lot, what they did at Boeing, trying to hire people who are smarter than you and listening to other people. I mentioned to you getting dissenting opinions and hashing things out. And it really clears up, what your beliefs are. And you can stay on your own beliefs forever. And just not very often. But I think if you read more, study more, you get together, the power of a group is amazing. That's what for me was so good when I went to Doral. I had 5 teachers at Sleepy Hollow, and we did a lot of teaching there. Same thing. I was at Quaker Ridge before that, which was a top place towards the United States. Sleepy's the top 100. I think Sleepy Hollow is one of the greatest places. It's just amazing. We had an extra 9 holes there. There's no Vanderbilt Stadium. If you ever get to New York, you should definitely go play. But we got together as a group. We'd sit down and look at video, like I did with you today, and look at the video, like, what do you see there? And sometimes you're surprised, yeah, that's pretty interesting. If somebody draws a different line, the golf machine, it's blood all over the thing and stuff. What happens there? Yeah, that was pretty interesting to me. I think now, looking at the club face, going back, we used to teach more toe up was the idea, and now it's more toe down, going through, less rotation. But the guys that did it a long ways are full release players. Like Morikawa is just a genius iron player. But guys that let go a little more, I call them full release players, are great drivers. Jack Nicklaus, Loco, those that really releases it. But that doesn't mean that one of the fundamentals in golf is your left arm starts whatever position you're in. So, and a lot of players start with their hands behind the club, and a lot of guys start with this little bit of a draggy release. But when you come to impact, this left arm is way forward of where it was at the address. And a lot of people who teach come down and leave their left arm back and get that little release and run through. So I teach that a lot to a lot of average players, where they don't get with the left arm forward. You can say the hands forward. I mean, pretty much that's what the golf machine did. Kind of the hands forward, but it's really the left arm's got to get forward as well. So that's another fundamental. That's easy to me. So I've got some average guy comes to me and he comes in and do that like this. It's great. You don't need your arm left arm forward. Your arm's just stuck here. It's not moving forward. So that's one thing. We look at right side bend. When you turn back, the left shoulder is whatever point you put here. When you come around this way and hit the ball, the right shoulder should be under that. So that's what all the tour players do. When there's something that they all do, that's what I teach. That's what I call fundamental. So it's certainly not the grip. It's not the stance. I mean, these are nice things. I teach it all the time. Railroad tracks is a great idea, but it's not necessarily a fundamental. It's a great ball swing. Fundamentals are more of how this club's got to be pretty close to a neutral swing path. Be a little bit in to out, or a little down to in, that fades, those balls. But you got to be good there. You got to have speed. And you have to be able to hit the center of the club face most of the time. Good.
Scott's telling me I've got one more, so I'll give you a nice easy one to finish.
No.
So you had quite a good amateur career. Realistically, debatable whether you could play full-time. Why did you end up not playing? Just don't get it.
I made a lot of mistakes in my life. I got some regrets in my youth, and did some dumb things. Life happens to all of us. There's a lot of things that happen to you. So I think to get up to the PGA Tour, it's a lot more than having a lot of talent, being able to hit the ball really well. That's why I kind of came up with that idea of the circle of the pie, with the long game, short game, magic game.
mentally. Because you can be really good at two things, but that's not enough, that won't be two other things. You got three things you're good with, you're doing, and if you got four, you're going to be great. But you can take any of those things and go a long ways, but you're not great at some of those other things, not good at some of those other things. So I did some dumb things. I put a lot of pressure on myself. You know, people are talking about the mental stuff a lot more now. You know, I played all sports. I felt like I was super competitive. You know, but I put a lot of pressure on myself. It wasn't, you know, not sleeping well. I think that's a big thing. That's when I worked with Tom. I know he slept 11 hours before the first disaster out of the West Coast. No way. I had him all night, flipping back and forth. Keegan's a great sleeper. All the guys are good. So sleep well. Curtis Reagan's not going to stay. That's what and no Rogers. They retired now. It's a lot of stress. So that's part of it. I went to New York just to try it. I went to New York to teach, and I like it. You know, I really enjoyed the teaching. I enjoyed a normal life.
Well, I'm sure that not only us in the room, but many adults